The stage lights burned hotter than the noon sun, yet the tension between the two men was colder than steel. Millions of Americans tuned in, expecting another predictable shouting match. But what they got in the first 30 seconds was a shockwave that made living rooms across the country feel like courtrooms. At one podium stood Donald Trump, jaw tight, suit glowing under the glare, eyes daring anyone to challenge his aura of dominance. At the other stood Denzel Washington, not as the Hollywood legend, but as a man carrying the calm fury of someone who had prepared for this exact collision. His posture wasn't defensive, it was declarative. He was there not to debate, but to expose. The moderator barely finished the opening question about integrity in leadership before Denzel leaned forward, his voice steady, surgical. This isn't about left or right. This is about truth versus spectacle. And tonight, Mr. Trump, you don't get to hide behind a script. The words cut deeper than a headline. Trump chuckled, the kind of laugh designed to belittle, but the smirk faltered as the audience remained silent. They weren't laughing with him, they were waiting. The camera zoomed tighter. Denzel's eyes locked like iron gates. For years, you've sold anger as policy. You've peddled division as patriotism, but behind the slogans, behind the rallies, there's a man afraid of one thing: accountability. The silence cracked. Gasps, shifts in seats, even Trump's jaw stiffened. What was supposed to be a brawl had just transformed into something heavier, an unmasking. And in that moment, 19 million Americans realized they weren't watching a debate. They were watching a dismantling. Trump straightened his tie, forcing a grin, trying to reclaim the rhythm he always relied on. He leaned into his microphone, his voice booming. Denzel, people don't want Hollywood lectures. They want strength. They want someone who wins. It was classic Trump: deflect, dominate, dismiss. But this time, the room didn't echo with applause. The silence was jagged, waiting to see if Denzel would blink. He didn't. Instead, Denzel unfolded a small sheet of paper, his movements deliberate, like a lawyer introducing evidence. Strength, he repeated, his tone razor-sharp. Let's talk about strength. Real strength isn't mocking veterans, or women, or people who don't look like you. Real strength is owning your failures, not disguising them as victories. He laid the sheet on the podium. You call yourself a winner, but history doesn't bend to slogans. It bends to truth. Trump's smirk twitched. He leaned forward, voice dripping sarcasm. Oh, so now you're the truth police? You think because you've been in movies, you know how the real world works? Let me tell you something, people love me. They love me more than they'll ever love you. But the audience didn't cheer. They shifted uncomfortably. Denzel didn't flinch, didn't even blink. No, Mr. Trump, he said, voice low but piercing. What they love is the performance. The mask, the show you've been selling them. Tonight, I'm not debating you, I'm unmasking you. The camera panned to Trump, his eyes flashing with the first flicker of unease. For the first time, the man who lived off control of the stage looked like someone losing it. The auditorium felt like a powder keg, waiting for the spark that would split the night open. Trump leaned hard into his podium, knuckles white, forcing his voice louder as if volume could bury vulnerability. Unmask me, please. The only mask here is Hollywood makeup. You've been reading scripts your whole life, Denzel. I've been writing history. His supporters clapped in uneven bursts, trying to recreate the rally's energy, but the sound didn't stick. It evaporated in the tension thickening the air. Denzel didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He reached for another page from his folder, this one stamped with government insignia. Writing history, he echoed softly. Then explain this. December 2018. Federal records show thousands of children separated from their parents at the border. Not numbers, names, ages, lives. Was that history, or cruelty disguised as policy? He held the page high enough for the cameras, the words confidential memo visible in bold letters. The crowd inhaled sharply. Reporters scrambled to capture every frame. Trump shifted, his eyes darting, his mouth fumbling for a retort. Finally, he scoffed. That's fake news. Old lies. You don't know the details. But his voice cracked at the edges, not steady, not commanding. Denzel didn't blink. His voice cut through the static like steel through cloth. The details are on this page, and the truth is on every family torn apart because of decisions you made. That's not winning, Mr. Trump. That's a stain. The silence afterward wasn't neutral. It was accusatory. Even the moderators avoided Trump's gaze, the weight of the evidence undeniable. Somewhere in the back, a spectator whispered, "He's got him." And for the first time in his career, Donald Trump looked less like the master of the room and more like the defendant in it. Trump gripped the podium harder, his jaw clenched as though he could hold the narrative together by force alone. His eyes narrowed on Denzel, and with that familiar sharp jab of his finger, he snapped, "You don't understand. You never sat in this chair. You never had to make the hard calls. It's easy to criticize from the sidelines when you're just an actor reading lines." His voice grew louder, desperate to summon the applause that once came automatically. But the crowd's response was fractured. Some clapped half-heartedly, others stayed silent, eyes fixed on Denzel. Denzel didn't rush. He let the weight of the moment hang, then leaned closer to his microphone. "You're right about one thing," he said calmly. "I haven't sat in that chair. But leadership isn't about the chair, it's about the character. And when the pressure came, you didn't protect the people, you protected yourself." He slid another document forward, this time a blown-up chart on the screen behind them. Red spikes shot upward like alarms. "These aren't my lines. These are COVID death rates in 2020. Hundreds of thousands lost. Real people. Real families. And while they grieved, you told America not to worry. You told them it would disappear like magic." Gasps rippled through the audience. The screen glowed with numbers that couldn't be heckled into silence. Trump's face tightened, the smirk that usually carried him abandoned him. He lashed back, "We did better than anyone. Everyone says it. Ask anybody. The vaccine, the jobs, the economy, it was perfect until China." Denzel cut him off, his tone suddenly sharp, cutting through Trump's ramble like a blade. "Perfect? Tell that to the nurses who worked in garbage bags because your administration refused to listen. Tell it to the families who had to say goodbye over FaceTime. That's not perfection. That's negligence." The audience didn't cheer, didn't clap. They stared, wide-eyed, as if realizing they weren't watching a debate at all, they were watching an unmasking, live, brutal, and undeniable. The silence in the hall was like a held breath. Trump tried to recover, his hands flailing as if volume and movement could drown the sting of Denzel's words. "You're twisting everything. The numbers, the stories, fake, all fake. The people know me. They know I fight for them. You fight for Hollywood applause." His voice thundered, but instead of cheers, there were murmurs, uncertain, uneasy. Denzel stood straighter, letting the accusation wash over him without a blink. Then he placed both hands on the podium, his voice low and steady, every syllable precise. "You call it fake because you can't face it. But America lived it. They buried loved ones while you bragged about ratings. You talk about fighting for the people? Real fighters don't abandon their own when the battlefield gets ugly." The moderator glanced nervously between them, but Denzel wasn't done. He pulled a folded letter from his folder, aged and worn at the edges. "This isn't Hollywood. This is real." He unfolded it slowly, revealing a handwritten note. "A nurse from Queens wrote this to me. She worked 19-hour shifts, lost 3 colleagues in a single week. She said, 'We begged for help, but all we got was silence and excuses.' That's not my script. That's her truth." The camera zoomed on the letter, the shaky handwriting visible to millions watching at home. The audience shifted again, not restless, but restless with anger. Trump barked, "Letters, papers, nonsense. People love me, they always will. You can't change that with one sob story." But Denzel's reply came sharp, cutting through the noise. "This isn't a sob story, Mr. Trump. This is America's story. And tonight, the mask comes off. No applause lines. No rallies, just accountability." The crowd erupted, not with cheers, but with an electric tension, the kind that signals something historic is happening in real time. Trump's face, once unshakable, now carried a flicker of doubt, and the cameras caught it all. Trump slammed his palm against the podium, the sound echoing through the hall like a gavel out of control. Enough. I built the greatest economy in history. The greatest. Everyone knows it. Lowest unemployment, highest stock market. People had money in their pockets, jobs, homes. Nobody did it better. And you, he jabbed his finger toward Denzel, you're trying to tear that down because you hate me. You hate success. For a moment, it almost sounded familiar, the same bravado that carried him through countless rallies. But the room wasn't a rally. The faces staring back weren't adoring fans, they were voters, journalists, skeptics. And instead of cheers, a heavy silence met his claim. Denzel didn't flinch. He let Trump's words hang, then calmly reached for another sheet, holding it up so the cameras could capture it. The greatest economy, he repeated, his voice like a scalpel. Then why did over 40 million Americans file for unemployment during your watch? Why were food banks overwhelmed, lines stretching for miles, families waiting in cars for hours just to eat? The screen behind them flickered to life again, displaying images of desperate families, grainy but unforgettable, children clutching empty grocery bags, parents with tears in their eyes, cars lined up in endless rows. The sight hit harder than any statistic. Trump's face reddened. He barked, "Those pictures mean nothing. The whole world suffered. It wasn't my fault, it was China, it was Democrats, it was anyone but me." His voice cracked, desperate, his fingers stabbing the air like a weapon. But Denzel leaned in, his tone colder now, almost surgical. Leadership isn't about blame. It's about responsibility. And when the storm came, you didn't hold the umbrella. You sold it. The audience gasped. A camera zoomed in on Trump's face, jaw tight, lips pressed, eyes flashing rage but also something else. Something rawer. Fear. The weight of Denzel's last words lingered in the air like smoke after an explosion. The audience wasn't clapping or booing anymore, they were frozen, as if realizing they were witnessing something larger than politics. Trump adjusted his microphone, his hands shaking slightly, and tried to summon the old fire. You think you're righteous, don't you? You think you're the voice of America. But you're nothing more than an overrated actor, a pretender. People voted for me because I'm real. You? You're just a performance. The insult hung heavy, but Denzel didn't react with anger. He leaned forward, voice low, deliberate, like a man aiming for the final blow. A performance? He tapped the podium once, sharp enough to echo. Let's talk about performance. Because you've been performing for years. The tough guy act, the billionaire myth, the man who never loses. But strip it all away, and what's left? A mask. And tonight, that mask is slipping. The camera zoomed on Trump, his complexion reddening, the confidence in his smile dissolving into something harsher. He shot back, "The people don't care about your lectures. They care about strength. They care about someone who will fight for them." But Denzel didn't give him space to breathe. He lifted another document, this one a transcript of Trump's own words. Strength isn't mocking a disabled reporter. Strength isn't calling fallen soldiers losers and suckers. Strength isn't inciting chaos and then hiding while others pay the price. That's not strength, Mr. Trump. That's cowardice dressed as power. Gasps cut through the hall. The transcript glowed on the big screen, undeniable evidence of words America had not forgotten. Trump's jaw tightened. He shook his head, muttering, "Fake, all fake," but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. For the first time, Donald Trump looked cornered, not by politics, not by polls, but by truth. And Denzel Washington stood before him, steady, unflinching, delivering that truth like a verdict. Trump's breathing grew heavier, the microphone catching the rough edges of each inhale. His shoulders tensed, his lips pressed into a thin line. You want to talk about cowardice? He barked, voice straining. I faced the media, the Democrats, the witch hunts, the trials. Nobody else could have survived what I did. Nobody. That's not cowardice, that's being the toughest man in America. He slammed his fist onto the podium, the sound rattling through the hall. But the move didn't land the way it once had. Instead of dominance, it reeked of desperation. The crowd murmured, unsettled. The moderators shifted nervously in their seats. And Denzel? He stood perfectly still, letting the silence magnify Trump's unraveling. Finally, Denzel spoke, his voice calm, but edged like a blade. Toughest man in America? He shook his head slowly. A tough man doesn't hide behind lawyers. A tough man doesn't call truth a witch hunt when the evidence is staring him in the face. A tough man doesn't run from responsibility, he carries it. He opened a final folder, revealing photos, Capitol Police officers battered and bruised on January 6, exhausted faces etched with fear. These men and women faced chaos you helped ignite. They didn't run. They didn't hide. They stood. That's toughness. That's courage. And you, Denzel's voice cut sharper now, you watched it on TV, rewinding clips like it was your show. That's not leadership. That's negligence at its most dangerous. The photos flashed on the giant screen, each one a gut punch. The audience gasped, some covering their mouths, others shaking their heads. Trump's face twisted, his mouth opening to respond, but nothing came. His usual arsenal, deflection, denial, dominance, was crumbling. Denzel leaned in, his eyes locked on Trump's. So let's be clear. Tonight isn't about debate points. It's about truth. And the truth is simple, you failed. And no mask, no performance, no shouting will ever erase that. The hall erupted, not with applause, but with a stunned silence so deep it felt historic. The mask had cracked, and the cameras caught every fracture. Trump's eyes darted across the audience, searching for some sign of rescue, a cheer, a chant, something to rebuild the walls that had crumbled around him. But the faces staring back weren't the rally crowds of the past. They weren't chanting his name. They were watching him like a man caught with the mask half off, exposed in real time. He gripped the podium with both hands, knuckles pale, and forced a laugh. You think you've beaten me tonight, Denzel? You think the people are going to believe your Hollywood act over me? Let me tell you, but the words faltered. His voice cracked mid-sentence, and the microphone caught it. It wasn't the voice of dominance. It was the voice of a man cornered. Denzel stepped forward, closing the distance not with aggression, but with presence. His voice lowered, softer now, but heavier than any shout. This was never about me. It was about them, he said, pointing to the audience, then to the cameras. The families who lost loved ones. The workers who were abandoned. The children who learned to fear instead of hope. You didn't lead them, you exploited them. You used their pain as your performance. And tonight, America finally sees it. The words sliced deeper than any statistic. Trump froze, his mouth half open, no rebuttal forming. The camera zoomed in on his face, the sweat on his forehead, the twitch at the corner of his eye. For years, he had thrived on control of the stage. But now, under Denzel's gaze, he looked small, diminished, cornered by truth itself. The audience erupted, not with noise, but with stillness. The kind of stillness that signals a shift, the recognition that something irreversible had just happened. The moderators glanced at each other, stunned. Reporters typed furiously, knowing they were capturing history as it broke. And then Denzel delivered the line that detonated across the nation, "This isn't a debate, Mr. Trump. This is an unmasking. And the mask is gone." The crowd gasped. Phones lit up instantly, clips already racing across social media. The moment had landed. The mask was shattered, the room hung in silence for a breathless beat after Denzel's final words. Then, almost instinctively, the audience erupted, not in the orchestrated chants that usually followed Trump, but in raw, scattered applause that grew louder, fuller, impossible to ignore. It wasn't unanimous, but it was powerful enough to drown out the old rhythms of the room. Trump shifted back from the podium, face rigid, eyes darting like a man who'd just realized control had slipped forever. The moderators, caught between duty and disbelief, tried to steer the debate back to policy. "Let's return to the budget question," one began, but it was useless. The story had already escaped the stage, sprinting into the bloodstream of the nation. Phones buzzed in laps, streams clipped and uploaded in real time. Headlines were already being written before the closing statements began. This wasn't a debate. It was an unmasking. Trump, red-faced, forced his closing remarks, but his words sounded hollow, rehearsed, drained of their usual punch. "America needs strength," he barked, but even he seemed unconvinced. The applause was scattered, obligatory. Denzel didn't grandstand. He didn't need to. He offered no triumphant gestures, no victory pose. Instead, he simply looked out over the crowd, nodded once, and stepped back. That restraint, that refusal to perform, only amplified the power of what he had done. He hadn't won by volume, he had won by clarity. When the cameras cut and the lights dimmed, the ripple didn't stop. Cable networks broke into programming with emergency panels. Social media trended one phrase all night: "The mask is gone." Analysts called it a turning point, pundits scrambled to spin it, and ordinary Americans replayed the clip, again and again. Trump left the stage hunched, his usual bravado absent. Denzel left steady, grounded, a quiet storm that had just rewritten the rules. History would remember that night not as another debate, but as the evening when truth stripped away spectacle. The night a mask fell, and the country saw what was really beneath. So what do you think? Was this the moment when Trump's mask finally slipped for good, or just another battle in a much bigger war for America's future? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every one. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and stay with us, because we're not done uncovering the moments they want you to forget. Until next time, God bless, and God bless America.